Magic just got a baby version of Greater Ricochet, and even though it isn't as powerful, it is still a big buff to Magic. In this video we're going to cover the new gloves and why they could be of interest to you, so whenever you're ready, grab your cup of tea, sit back, relax, and enjoy. These new wrist wraps have good armor and magic damage bonus value when compared to similar hand slot items for Magic. The special is as follows. When using Dragon Breath, you have 6 seconds to then follow that up with Combust. Except instead of being a bleed, all hits are dealt instantly and with 25% more damage. You can de-equip or switch the item after having used Dragon Breath and still retain the effect, given that Combust is used within 6 seconds. Because it's still a bleed ability, many things do not boost the damage of this ability even with the gloves, including curses, critical hits, Slayer Helmet bonuses, and other stuff. Bleeds are however boosted by damage bonus from equipment, vulnerability, maniacal aura, slayer perks, and scrimshaws. I'm fully aware you can use the Dragon Rider amulet to boost Dragon Breath, but we're not going to be focusing on that ability in this video, we're going to be focusing on Combust. According to the wiki, the average ability damage of Combust is 120.6% in total, as its hits seem to be mostly on the lower end of the 100 to 188% range. At first I was like, why isn't it 144%, but after some small tests it made perfect sense. A short test with a small sample size later and I determined the average was around 117%, but I assume the Wikians have taken a much larger sample size or went into the math somehow. In short, we're going to go with the 120.6% on average. Now, since the gloves boost the main and max damage by 25%, I'm going to assume the average ability damage is also boosted by 25%. That would mean the average ability damage of Combust would be boosted to 150.75%. Currently, you can increase Combust damage in 4 ways, the first of which being straight up damage buffs, including scrimshaws, vulnerability, and damage auras, although some other things like curses and sunshine don't seem to work. Walking the enemy for double damage obviously also works. The Rack and Ruin ability, which you can gain by using the Exsanguinate spell and having 20 stacks, can add an additional 2 hits to Combust for the next 10 seconds, bringing the total ability damage up to around 211% ability damage. You can also use the Lunging perk to increase damage by a maximum of 26.58% with Lunging 4 if the target is stationary. However, you also decrease the damage you do by using it on a moving target instead. This all depends on the lunging rank. What it comes down to, if your target is stationary, like for example the Ambassador, use lunging. If the target can move or can be walked, like a Gold Rush Dungeon boss, you don't use lunging. If you use Rack and Ruin, then use Dragon Breath, and then walk your target while using Combust, you can see some crazy high hits with this spell. If you can afford to camp Exsanguinate, it doesn't seem that bad of an option either as a switch or a campable set of gloves. As of recording this video, the wrist wraps or gloves are 50 million GP, and considering it's simply a buff for the Combust ability, they are worth getting for every single player. But are they really? Cinderbanes are the king of gloves. They are best in slot at any single boss and slayer tasks that can be poisoned. Now that doesn't mean wrist wraps are useless, as they can be used as a Dragon Breath switch. I'm fully aware that not everyone likes switching, including myself, and that's why I can't recommend these to everyone. They are, however, a really good option for bosses that cannot be poisoned. But so is the Death Touch Bracelet. Some examples of non-poisonable bosses would be Rots, Vorago, Araxor, Queen Black Dragon, and of course raids. I want to focus your attention to raids. Both Yakamaru and Beastmaster Durzag are immune to poison, so using these wrist wraps there wouldn't be a bad idea. What's even better about these wrist wraps is that you wouldn't be cancelling out other players' bleeds, as bleeds in group PVM don't seem to stack. So if there are multiple mages on your raid team, that's a big benefit from these wrist wraps, on top of the boosted damage with Combust. At the end of the day, to get the most out of these wrist wraps, you would need to use them as another switch. Plain and simple, there's no denying you're better off using a Death Touch Bracelet for that reflect passive at non-poisonable bosses, and then switching to these for Dragon Breath. But what if we look away from what's the most optimal thing to do and simply look at these gloves as an alternative or cheap upgrade in the Magic upgrade order? In that case, if the gloves hover around 10 to 15 million GP in price, or perhaps lower like 5 mil, they can be a very valid upgrade once you have your tier 90 weapon and tier 80ish gear. The reason they are is because Cinderbanes are simply too expensive at current prices in comparison. This is assuming you aren't working on 3 styles at once, which is honestly too hard to give advice on. Cinderbanes are still the king and are the gloves you want to buy as soon as you have the setup you can see on screen. I can't give you player specific advice, but I can say these gloves are effective and worth buying for the majority of mage users. Most of the content in-game is poisonable, including Slayer. By the way, it does work with the Greater Chain. So there's no reason to not get Cinderbanes once you have your high level starting setup. Assuming the price of the wrist wraps doesn't exceed 1/3 of the price of Cinderbanes, these gloves will fill a small void in between not having Cinderbanes and buying Cinderbanes for the average Joe. If Cinderbanes cost 80 million GP and these gloves are around 26.66 million GP or more, you have to consider the fact that Cinderbanes are tribrid gloves and can be used with all 3 combat styles, meaning the cost for each style would only be 1/3 of the price of Cinderbanes. I hope that makes sense. You could always sell the gloves as well after using them, so it might not matter as much. I also don't know what gloves will be added with the future front of the Elder Goldrush dungeon, so it's difficult to predict how worthy these will be in the future. If you're high level players with Cinderbanes already though, these are 100% worth buying as either a switch or as a set of specific gloves for non-poisonable creatures. That is if you don't want to buy a 70 million GP Death Touch bracelet for content you might rarely do. And even then, it's still a good switch. I hope you guys found this video interesting and informative, and if you did, leave a like down below and maybe even consider subscribing, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.